Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. Baltimore Positive. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Happy Kwanzaa. Happy Christmas Eve. Happy New Year's. Happy Clinchmas. The Ravens are in the playoffs again. All of our Maryland crab cake tours in the last month have been brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery, as well as Jiffy Lube Multi-Care. We're very appreciative of all of our sponsors, the ones that are remaining with us next year, the ones that aren't. But that's okay because the Ravens are making the playoffs. Luke's going to be monitoring things on Christmas Day, as will I. Sort of a really short week here. Luke and I are going to get together, and I think we're going to discuss the remnants of Pittsburgh, but this Houston thing's right in the midst of all of this. I mean, I've got eggnog on for Christmas Eve. It's a short week. There's no traffic. Happy Christmas to you. How are things? And big victory over the Steelers. All I need to do is pick against them and they'll win. That's the new deal for me, I think.
I was going to start with saying, what day is it? Saturday game, Sunday back at practice, Wednesday afternoon. Wait, Wednesday afternoon game. That sounds like COVID, right? 4 years ago when they went out to Pittsburgh with
Is Lamar
the
playing?
JV squad. He is. He is. That's the good news this time around. But a whirlwind last few days and the next few days ahead. But huge win for the Ravens on Saturday night. AFC North. We're going to see what happens here. It's not a slam dunk one way or the other. I think I looked at, I guess it was ESPN's Power Index, their analytics. The Ravens are a slight favorite, but it's kind of close to a coin flip because we've talked about the tiebreaker for common games that Pittsburgh still has.
Well,
But
we'll know that by 4 o'clock on Wednesday, right?
we
They're
would
going to
think
beat
so.
Kansas City or not, right?
Well, I mean, it's that, but keep in mind, Cincinnati in Week 18 plays Pittsburgh, and we know how an AFC North game can go. So there's
No,
still a
but you
lot to
see
be
that pass
decided.
Burrow made? That
That
I
was
mean,
wild.
dude,
Although I thought he
I,
was down. I thought he was
for
down.
me, like that was that was one of the greatest passes I've ever seen. And I've seen Lamar do. I've seen all sorts of crazy quarterback play in this league, but I thought that one really stood out as I don't know if I've ever seen that one before. That was kind of a good one there.
That was pretty crazy. Speaking of that, how about the end of the Bucks Cowboys game? Baker Mayfield escaping and he flips it to his running back and White loses the ball then after a great effort by Mayfield. But no, bringing it back to the Ravens. I mean, such a big cathartic win on Saturday night. Marlon Humphrey with the defensive play of the year, first defensive touchdown of the season, the first pick six of his career. I mean, we've talked about Humphrey. This
And
was
he wasn't taunting or anything there, right?
his explanation. I will say
He's such a
this.
goofy human. I mean, like
Oh,
just
I mean,
following him and why? Like,
right.
dude, you were taunting. Don't
I
stop.
will say I'll say this much. The very first time he did it, I would actually accept it. But then toward the end of it, it's like you're not even looking anywhere close to where David Ajabo was. Of course you were taunting him. But anyway, huge play. A play they absolutely needed to have. As I wrote at BaltimorePositive.com, Minkah Fitzpatrick's interception, what happened there with Lamar and Bateman. Bateman stops. Whose fault is it? Who knows? But that was the here we go again moment, right? I mean, that was the moment where you're saying, oh my gosh, is this going to happen against the Steelers again? It's a 7-point game. You're getting ready to go up 2 scores. And then Marlon Humphrey does that 2 plays later. And the Ravens absolutely needed it, and they got it. So
You know what I
big
found
win.
interesting in the aftermath is people thought 17 points blew them out. I'm like, I don't know, man. It was a really close 17-point football game for my tastes because it feels like on either side you could say play or two here or there. It was not a domination. Now, the Derrick Henry and tackling him thing,
Yeah.
I don't want to say I told you so 2 years ago, and we've had fun with this all along, but when I was watching that on Saturday night and I'm following your tweets and we're following along, and after the Humphrey pick, when it was clear they were going to win, I started to really think about the difference between him and everything else. And I mean Jamal Lewis, Ray Rice, pick anybody you want. I mean, that's ever played this position for this team. And I'm thinking comparable, as I wrote in my column, is if his comparable's Jim effing Brown, I don't know. He's not comparable to Eric Dickerson. He's not comparable to Barry Sanders. I mean, like this is an insane thing they have that they can win a Super Bowl with. Like if I'm putting $1 on them to win the Super Bowl right now, it's because nobody's going to want to tackle him on a cold night.
You've really changed your tune a lot in 1 week because you just said a week ago you wouldn't put a dollar on the Ravens. But
I
no, look,
still wouldn't put a dollar on them to win 3 games in a row next month on the road. I think that's a mess for
okay.
them.
Did you see Buffalo's defense again on Sunday?
Well, there you go with Derrick
Uh,
Henry. So yeah, and
sure, sure.
Buffalo better
Well,
worry about like San Diego or Denver coming in. You know what I
right.
mean? Like the whole tournament is about health for me and about
Ravens are
whatever
healthy.
whatever that internal fortitude is that allows you to take a really close game and beat the Steelers by 17 and have your fan base say, "Hey, we covered." You know what I mean? Like the Ravens smell real good right now, but Wednesday's like tomorrow.
Sure. And that's the biggest. This win, as big as it was, as important as it was from an AFC North division hope standpoint, from a psyche standpoint, from a standpoint of, as you alluded to, not wanting to have to win 3 straight road games to get to a Super Bowl. It was wildly important. It was a win of what you hope will be great magnitude looking back at it. But if you go out and lose on Wednesday, doesn't mean quite as much, right? I mean, yes, they've clinched a playoff spot. We knew that. We knew that that was a foregone conclusion weeks ago, right? We knew this team was going to be in the playoffs, but you have to follow that up with a win against Houston. And it's a Texans team that very emotional loss against the Chiefs with what happened with Tank Dell, just an awful scene, and CJ Stroud and so many players distraught over that. But a
By the way,
team
the
that
Justice Hill thing, when he hit the turf, I had my cat on my
scary.
lap. I got up and went for a walk because I knew they were going to a TV timeout. I didn't want to watch it again. I thought he was dead. Like, I mean, I swear to you, I thought, oh my God, he's unconscious. And I thought, I don't want to see the ambulance come. I don't want to see them roll to commercial. I don't want to hear the hushed tone of the announcer. I don't know, dude. I mean, it's happening every week, right? Like, you and I just gave 2 examples of it happening on Saturday, and they only played 2 games on Saturday.
I mean, it's always been a brutal game, Nestor. I mean, it's not anything new. I don't like it when it happens either, but it's part of the game. You play tackle football even when you're a kid, you know that bad injuries can happen. But the good news is Justice Hill got up, walked to the locker room. Certainly don't anticipate him being out there on Wednesday. He's in the concussion protocol, as you'd expect, but it was good to see him get up. And for the Ravens, good thing they have Derrick Henry, right? Good thing they have Keaton Mitchell, who probably is going to get some opportunities against the Texans. But you just look at the totality of the win. Lamar Jackson, 3 more touchdown passes. I mean, what was amazing about that game was Lamar finally breaks through to have a big game against the Steelers. Interception aside, he played really good football overall, right? And Derrick Henry did what he did. Uh, can't mention Derrick Henry without mentioning the offensive line and the way that they blocked between the tackles. Let's face it, most of Derrick Henry's greatest production this year has been on those outside toss plays. They ran between the tackles a ton against Pittsburgh. And say what you want about the Steelers' defense being banged up, they weren't really banged up on the defensive line, other than, I guess, TJ Watt, who wasn't 100%. But, they had all of their defensive tackles and interior linemen other than Ogunjobi. They had all their edge players. So they had their linebackers. So the fact that the Ravens offensive line produced the way that they did and blocked the way they did for Derrick Henry, and he ran the way that he did, that was encouraging. I said to you all along, if this Derrick Henry thing was truly going to be worth it, it's going to be for this time of year in January. I don't care what his rushing yardage is in September, October, and November. I've said over and over and over, the Ravens have had a great running game from the moment Lamar Jackson stepped on the field as their starting quarterback. So for me, it was never about, oh, well, need a 2,000-yard back. No, you need, if he's really going to be worth it, he's going to make a difference in January. And if he doesn't, then uh, you should have spent that money on Kevin Zeitler, for example.
Well, by the way, when the Bills were out there running around in the Patriots' old uniforms, it was 7 degrees in Buffalo.
Terrible uniforms, by the way.
You're not thinking that Lamar Jackson's going to throw the ball around on a 7 degree night in Buffalo. You know what I mean? Like he might a little bit. Mark Andrews might be effective, but I wouldn't think you're going downfield all night. You're going to go downhill all night at that point. And to my thought, they're going to have to go play a game in Buffalo. They're going to have to go play a game in Kansas City, and they're built for that, right? Like, you can't say they're not from the defensive standpoint, they're built for that. They're built for cold weather. Maybe not Lamar, who looks cold like me anytime it's below 65. I mean,
Although look at his record in December, he must be doing something right because they've played cold games and it's not like he's been bad in those. I mean, he really hasn't. Go look.
no, I'm just saying, like, it's just cold's cold. Everybody gets cold. I mean, the fans, everybody gets cold.
Sure.
And I think I've just seen it cost teams. I mean, I've seen teams get knocked out of the playoffs because they get cold. I think Denver kind of got knocked out in the Mile High Miracle game because they got cold that night because it was friggin' cold. And I don't think there's any way you're a kid from Florida and you normalize 7 degrees in Buffalo in the third quarter and tackling Derrick Henry. And there's as I said, a fortitude part of what I saw the Ravens do here that lets me know they're ready to put their big boy pants on. And look, we've talked about this a million times. Marlon Humphrey, Ronnie Stanley, Lamar,
They all have to
Mark
do it.
Andrews. They've all sat around telling, back when I was a real media member before they stole my press credentials, I would sit in the locker room at the end of the season and hear them make excuses for losing to the Chargers or the Bills or the Titans or whomever it is. At some point, they need to have games like Saturday night and have that feeling going on this time of the year. And they have it right now. We'll see if it carries over to Houston or not. And by the way, Wednesday's a different day. Christmas is a different day for all four of these teams. All four of these teams are going to the playoffs, right? Like there's all sorts of weird scenarios where the Steelers are still up and they win the tiebreaker. Is there any scenario other than the Ravens tanking and the Steelers winning on Wednesday where they would take Cleveland off? I mean, everybody's going to have to play hard next weekend, no matter what, kind of, sort of, right?
Um, I think so. But even the scenario that if Pittsburgh wins, and let me make sure I'm talking through this correctly because I'm trying to do it off the top of my head.
I'm trying to figure it out too.
But here's the difference. If Pittsburgh were to win on Wednesday and the Ravens lose, it's still not over because the reason why would be should Pittsburgh lose to Cincinnati in Week 18, which is on the table. I mean, it's a division game,
they
right?
They would take on another division loss.
They would take on a division loss, and if the Ravens would win, they would finish tied, but the Ravens would have a better division record, and then they would take the AFC North. So, point is,
Pittsburgh has to play two no matter what, is what
they
do.
Saying. So the bad scenario that almost played out for the Ravens on Sunday would have been had Buffalo lost to New England, which that was dicey. I mean, they were down 14-0. Second half, of course, the Patriots offense kind of, I think he's a promising quarterback in a big picture sense, but, you see they're very, very limited. But had Buffalo lost there, Kansas City would have clinched the number 1 seed. And then suddenly you're talking about Patrick Mahomes, who played fine on the ankle, right? I mean, I think that was obviously overblown as far as the severity and the concern about that leading into their game against Houston. But what you didn't want if you're a Ravens fan is Kansas City going to Pittsburgh on Wednesday afternoon and not having anything to play for, and suddenly they're calling off the dogs a little bit and resting some of their guys that are banged up.
Who is their quarterback? I don't know who their backup.
Carson Wentz is their backup.
There you go. All right, thank you.
So yeah, but that didn't happen. So Kansas City still has to play, and Pittsburgh, albeit it sounds like they're going to get. Sounds like Pickens has a good chance to play. Sounds like they're going to get some of their other guys back. So we're going to see how this plays out.
They lost 2 in a row, dude. They went to Philly and lost. They went to Baltimore.
I told you that schedule.
Right?
I told you 3 weeks ago we talked about this and we talked about their schedule and said, look, I mean, especially at that point, not knowing they were going to be without George Pickens. And what's funny about Saturday's game, what was lost in that, and you alluded to this. I mean, I would agree with you. You look at 34-17 and you say, wow, the winning team dominated, the winning team controlled that. And look, the Ravens deserve full credit. The Ravens deserve to win that football game. That was an emphatic finish to that football game. But Pittsburgh moved the ball through 3 quarters against them, even without Pickens.
They averaged. The play Darius Washington made, as I said in my column, that would have been the play of the game, but it happened too early in the game to be the play of the game. But, stripping the quarterback at the 3-yard line when he's going in is a thing,
It was also a really bad play by Russell Wilson because it's not like he didn't catch him from behind and punch it out from behind and it was this great play. Like Russell Wilson saw him coming, dude, slide. Like, what are you doing? I mean, that was an awful play by him. Great play by Darius Washington. And you're right. I mean, you look at that play, potentially it's 14-7. If he slides there, they score a play or two later, you would assume, because they ran the ball okay against the Ravens.
I think the
Uh,
25-year-old Russell Wilson wouldn't have gotten touched there. You know what I mean? Like it
Probably,
felt to
yeah.
me like he had
Slow.
one-on-one and 3 yards to beat and a little bit of ground. It felt like he had a chance to get in, right? But he just ran straight at right at him. I mean,
It was weird.
it was really weird. Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
poor play, and the decision to throw the ball that Humphrey caught, just a poor pass too. Great play by Humphrey, all that, but
Jabo
like,
pressured him. Yeah, it was
yeah,
good to see. But yeah, too bad turnover. I mean, this is why when you and I, or anyone, not just you and me, have talked about the Steelers, I don't, even though Russell Wilson's playing better than he did in Denver, he's not the Russell Wilson in his prime in Seattle. I mean, he just isn't. And he played quite well overall through 3 quarters. That fumble aside in the second quarter, of course. But I mean, those two turnovers were absolute backbreakers. So, but on the flip side, to go back to your point, because I was making this point, the Ravens, they recover their 2 fumbles and really a third fumble with Desmond King late in the game, although the game had been decided at that point. But you look at that back in Week 11 when they went to Pittsburgh, the Ravens didn't recover their fumbles. In Week 16, they did. Fumble recovery. Aaron Schatz will be the first to tell you. Analytics types will be the first to tell you recovering fumbles is not a skill. That's more of a luck. Now, forcing fumbles, that's a skill, right? And we've seen that. And we've seen Terrell Suggs or Marlon Humphrey 5 years ago, I think, had a boatload of forced fumbles. But fumble
and
recovery,
it's the time of the year because you brought the Patriots up. You take the air out of the football, and you can't force a fumble.
yeah,
So if you
all
can't
right.
force a fumble, then that's just as good. So I want to point that out for anybody out there looking to cheat or wondering what the Patriots did for years when they never fumbled the football.
But you just look at that game. I mean, that was a major factor. And look, you have to take care of the football. That's part of the game. It's not luck. Okay, they were fortunate to recover their own fumbles. Yeah. But you look at that, it's part of the game. I saw Steelers fans on social media crying about how banged up they were. Availability and being healthy is part of the game, right? It's an annual war of attrition. The Ravens some years have not been so good in that department, whether you want to call it luck or Steve Saunders and their training staff or whatever it is. They've been healthy. Justice Hill right now aside, and a couple other guys are a little banged up. It's a short week. We'll see. But by and large, this is a really healthy football team. This is a team who has Lamar Jackson playing his finest season. I mean, whether Lamar's going to win the MVP or not, and look, I am exhausted beyond belief talking about the MVP at this point in time. I feel like there's some NFL fans out there who care about the MVP more about what happens in January. It's just that crazy. You see so much discourse, but Lamar's having a fantastic season, better than he was last year. Certainly a different statistical profile than what he was 5 years ago when he was unanimous MVP. But you have him, you have Derrick Henry, you have the best wide receiver duo this team has had since, in my mind, at least Steve Smith and Torrey Smith a decade ago, with Zay Flowers, who went over 1,000 yards, Bateman with 8 touchdowns now. I mean, this is a really legitimate, serious, contending offense. And now you have a defense that still isn't great. It's not the 2000 Ravens. We understand that. But it is certainly a defense that, at least in my mind, I think you would agree, is inspiring way more confidence the way they've been playing since about mid-November than they did through the first 2.5 months of the season. I think we can at least agree on that much. So, look.
Well, they had their chance on Wednesday to go on the road against this kid. They're going to be running around down there. I don't, what they have to play for and what Kansas City had. I mean, everybody's playing pretty hard right now from what I see. But, all of these also rans that we sat around all day Sunday and watching 2-10 play and backup quarterbacks and all that stuff. We'll see that with Cleveland next week as well for the Ravens part. But these slobber knockers on Saturday and Wednesday, these 4 teams that are going to be in the playoffs, and then Buffalo, which looks like they're on the struggle a little bit right now, and then whoever the Chargers and the Broncos are, we get a real taste on Christmas Day of where we've seen this little pre-play-in tournament, kind of sort of like a World Cup thing, like a
Yeah.
play-in. Everybody plays everybody, right? It's kind of weird. But the league set it up, and it's set up nicely for Christmas Day to have meaningful games, both sides, and really statement games, I think, for these teams to say, where are you, Kansas City, to put Pittsburgh into peril to have to go on the road? Or Pittsburgh to go, hold their own lunch on Christmas Day, 4 days after everybody played and after getting beat for the second time. I mean, Pittsburgh goes 3 losses in a row in 11 days, right? To three contenders, and they're headed to wild card them to maybe go to Houston or maybe come to Baltimore. Steelers just go away as a thing, right? And I don't think the Steelers are a threat to win the Super Bowl. I think the Steelers are a threat to come back to Baltimore in 3 weeks from now and beat the Ravens 17-16 on a snowy day, or something crazy happens. That's possible to me. But I think the Ravens are the better team. I think I felt that way all last week. I think I even felt that way when I picked Pittsburgh to beat them. I just felt like Pittsburgh has the ability to play defense against them because they scheme it up and they have the players and they spend the whole offseason working on it. I wouldn't want to see Pittsburgh again 2 weeks from now. I would way rather see, pick your poison, Denver, San Diego, wherever we call them, Houston, and even though we're going to see them again, that would be a road game. Obviously, that wouldn't be what you want to see, but I'd rather see any of that. I don't really want to see Pittsburgh again. That's just how I feel about them.
Well, I mean, I through the lens of a divisional opponent who knows you, sure, I'll buy that. But through the lens of it's the playoffs, I mean, you're
Here's
going to
the
have to
weird
play
thing.
good
I think the
teams.
Ravens are better than them 8 out of 10 times, and I think
Thought
the
that for 5 years now.
right,
Yeah.
right, except that that I would only say they're better five. They would split if they played 10 times because the Steelers play them well. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't think Russell Wilson will do the stupid things he did the next time around. And if he doesn't, it might have come down to Justin Tucker having to make a 52-yard field goal to win the game. Like, that's how closely matched the teams are. And Pittsburgh worries me in that way. But getting them out of the way, I
Yeah.
think they'll lose on Christmas Day, right? I think they'll lose at home to Kansas City and gimpy Patrick Mahomes comes in. But nobody seems to think the Chiefs are any good. Nobody seems to think the Vikings are any good. All they do is win. They just
Well,
win.
I don't think anyone thinks the Chiefs aren't very good. I think people think they're not 14-1 historically great, I think is more so what the discourse is, right? I don't think people say when you think of a 14-1 team, you think of the 1998 Minnesota Vikings. You think of the 2007 Patriots who were
We don't
undefeated
have
in
to
the regular
motorboat
season.
teams every week to win every week,
Right. Well, I mean, it's been a grind for them. I mean, they win one score games. They win
which
one score
says more
games.
about them than
Mm, yes and no. Yes, it does. However, don't dismiss the quality when you boat
their
race teams.
vulnerability.
Right,
I got it.
exactly. But
Yeah.
because of what we just talked about, you don't recover your fumbles, right? You fumble the ball a couple times, and instead of falling on it, the other team gets it, right? You trip on your offensive lineman's foot on 3rd and 1, right? I mean, different things like that can happen. So look, I'm with you,
To
and
me,
believe
Kansas
me,
City's playing better. They got wide receivers now. They kind of figured it out a
their
little
O
bit.
line is the big question, right? I mean, they have Joe Tooney, their left guard, kicking out the left tackle the last couple weeks. Now, they should get their left tackle back, who they signed, and he hurt his hamstring, obviously. But that's the big question for them. I mean, Mahomes' his ankle, you saw it early in that game. He's scrambling and scores a
Well, you go to
touchdown, right?
Pittsburgh and win on Christmas Day, you don't have to play again for 3 weeks.
Sure, exactly. I mean, that's that's why again, that's why I think you were a Ravens fan. You were nervous watching that Buffalo game because even though you're saying, hey, the Bills, look, they're vulnerable, but if the Bills had lost that game and then Kansas City has nothing to play for, then that Pittsburgh game on Christmas is way different. So that didn't happen, of course, and
Well, the best scenario is here. Everybody's playing hard, even the Commanders.
yeah, yeah, but no, but to go back to your point, I mean, with the Ravens and the Steelers, look, it's a rivalry game. You know, think back to the last. I was actually thinking about this somewhat on Saturday or Sunday afternoon as I was just watching some of the different games and thinking about the residue of the big win on Saturday night, and thinking about the Houston game. But I think back to the last time the Ravens played the Steelers back in the playoffs. It was the 2014 postseason. Remember Suggs with the interception with his thighs, right? That the time the Ravens finally broke through and beat Pittsburgh in January. But think back to the regular season. Now, I think the Ravens beat Pittsburgh in a Thursday night game at home early in the season. That might have been week 2. That was the Ray Rice week, right? I mean, the day after the season opener, when the video comes out, they release them, and they had a short week, if you recall.
It,
So they
it,
won
it was the
that.
week my wife had leukemia the second time. I remember pretty
Right,
well, September 15. Yeah.
right. So that was early 2014. Then I think it was
And they had gotten their ass kicked by Denver to begin the season too that year, right?
no, that was 2013.
I'm mixing years up.
2014 was the year they lost to Cincinnati at home in week 1. Flacco took a terrible sack at the end of the first half,
Fair
and
enough.
they lost like 15-10 or something weird. Anyway, point I was trying to make, before we start getting into the weeds too much, Ravens won at home early that year in convincing fashion. They went to Pittsburgh for a Sunday night game in mid-November, maybe late November. Pittsburgh blew them out. So the third time they played, Baltimore going to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh had won the division, and the Ravens won. So the point is, with these, you could try to analyze what happens in the first meeting, and what does that mean for the second. It doesn't mean a darn thing. They're two rivals. They, I, you said something that was interesting to me because you made mention about Russell Wilson. The Ravens have a massive edge at the quarterback position. It's not even close. Russell Wilson, okay, what he was a decade ago, fine. He's not that guy anymore. They have Lamar Jackson, who's arguably the very best player in the entire universe, right? But he's certainly one of the 2 or 3 best players in the entire universe. No matter how you feel about
Well,
it,
if the Ravens go up there, they'll be a 2-point favorite, right?
They'll be a favorite, as they should be, right?
Right.
But well, you have to see how it plays out. So, I think if you're the Ravens right now, they're in the same boat as anyone else in the sense of Kansas City is going to be the number 1 seed most likely, and you have to go through them. But anyone else, whether
The
you're talking
Chargers and
about
Denver keep winning though too, which really forces the Ravens' hands to not get caught and be a 6 or a 7 seed. I mean,
right,
the pulling away part that you get to go to Houston instead of Pittsburgh. I don't know, but I mean, the Ravens can control their own gig here by winning a little bit, right? Like winning on Wednesday on the road. We're all feeling great. They just won at home. This
yeah,
is a really tough thing to do, to go down there and win. And it's
short
tough for
week,
them to win at home too. But this is the tough game for
short
me.
week.
Yeah, especially on the back end of all the emotions of Marlowe feeling good and Henry ran. I think Henry ran, but I bet he's sore as hell right now. I
Yeah,
bet
I
they
mean,
all are right now,
no,
right?
no question. I mean, look, we talk about this all the time, and it's such a weird week again. I mean, they were back in the building at lunchtime on Sunday. As the 1 o'clock games on Sunday were kicking off, they were coming back in the building, having meetings,
Like it's
turning
Wednesday.
the page that, oh, you're playing the Houston Texans in a couple days, who are division champions, and okay, maybe C.J. Stroud and company they haven't been as good as they were last year, maybe haven't been as good as what expectations were for them this year, but they're still in the playoffs, and they've got a good defense, and they have Nico Collins. Unfortunately, they don't have Tank Dell because of the horrific injury for, not so much saying that, that it's a bad thing for the Ravens. Obviously, injuries are injuries and it's part of the game, but, they're still a capable football team. And when we talk about this, when it's a typical Thursday night road game, we always talk about how challenging that is in general. How much more challenging is it on the heels of playing a physical Baltimore Pittsburgh game, right? I mean, think about the history of these two teams after they play each other over the years. I mean, I can think of some of the biggest wins from the Ravens over the Steelers. Go look at who they played the following week and how they fare. Even some of their best teams over the years, it's not necessarily pretty the following week. So then that's magnified then when it's a shorter week. So let me be clear. I'm not saying they're going to lose. I'm picking the Ravens to win this game. A little preview there for you. Still want you to go check out my 12 Ravens thoughts and prediction as we get closer to Wednesday's kickoff. But they better not be overlooking this. And even if it's not an overlooking type thing, fatigue's a real thing. Soreness is a real thing. A quick turnaround's a real thing. Playing a typical Thursday road game, only it's a Wednesday afternoon. That's a challenge. I mean, that's a massive challenge. And look, I'm not saying that to cry the blues for the Ravens. I mean, all 4 of these teams are in this gauntlet right now. All 4 of these teams come Christmas night when they're all back at home and they're having a day or two to be with their families and open up some presents and all of that.
By the way,
They're
they're
all
all
going to be
making the playoffs too. They're all
right.
making the
Oh,
playoffs. All
of
four of these
course.
teams.
But
Yeah.
they're all going to be exhaling at that point in time because then they're all going to have their mini bye and then they're going to say, okay, when are we playing next in week 18? Is it Saturday? Is it Sunday?
The Chiefs can go to the Bahamas for a week if they want.
If they win on
Yeah.
Christmas, yeah, because they'll have it locked up. I mean, keep in mind Buffalo does have the head-to-head there. So, but
You
one
talk
thing
about
you
a
mentioned,
different pathway for all of these teams over the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks. If the Chiefs win, they become a super favorite to me just because they're going to sit at home. I mean, just really sit at home and get better and figure it out. And I think Andy Reid and Spagnuolo, Tobe, those guys are hell on all of that. And it might
yeah,
be the Ravens coming in there first if they have to go to Houston, right? You know what I mean? Or Pittsburgh or whatever it would be. They're going to get a good team in the first week. But we're talking about like, I'm doing the math on when that would even be. The Chiefs wouldn't play a real game again until the 18th or 19th of January.
yeah. I mean, hey, that's why it was so disappointing the Ravens didn't do it last year because they had that advantage, right? They were the team that sat for the first week. And look, that can have its pluses, which are obvious, but it can also have its factors that can be a
You know what the
negative.
plus
If
is? You can't lose this week.
Sure. Well, that's why I always said the number one seed. Whenever people would talk about the rest versus rust thing and whether you should rest your starters in week 18 if you have it clinched and all that, I would always say, give me the known, right? If I don't play Lamar Jackson in week 18, as was the case last year, I know he's not going to get hurt that day. I know my best players aren't going to get hurt that day. And yeah, they might be rusty for the divisional round, but I'll take my chances on that rather than running the risk of any of those guys getting hurt. And then I don't know if they're going to be there for the divisional round. So that's Kansas City's advantage
Well,
right
the other
now.
part of that is the Ravens are going to have to play Cleveland. Like really play full up.
Yeah.
I mean, no matter, I can't find a scenario here. Well, if they lose, but then even if you lose, you don't want to
No,
lose to
it's
Cleveland and be the seventh seed. Like I just think that they're going to have to play a full season. The
yeah,
Chiefs are teetering on maybe not having to play a full season, and maybe the Texans as well wouldn't have to play. There's a couple of teams that won't have to really play that last game and rest people, but the Ravens are not one of them, and that puts really everybody in harm's way. You know what I mean? It only takes 1/4 of two injuries to really f you up. And
sure.
especially that Pittsburgh game the other day, they're without Justice Hill this week, whatever. If Lamar had turned an ankle, if Derrick Henry had taken on a bone brace, it is something that
Yeah.
would cost you 4 days later. And by the way, I must point out this time of year as the Colin Kaepernick media member after 3 decades, I'm just really happy the NFL takes player safety so seriously. Because I really wonder what would happen if they didn't. I mean, would they play on Tuesday? When would they play?
I've said it for years. There will be a time. It's not going to be imminent. Let me be very clear. There will be a time where they will get to a point where it'll be on the table that they're playing every day of the week. They'll they'll figure out a way. They'll go to 18 games. They'll put an extra bye week in there because it'll make the scheduling a little more flexible. And they will get to a point. They will at least attempt to get to a point where they stagger out the schedule so much that they're playing every day of the week or very close to it, right? We will see this could be right. What we're seeing right now could be the pilot for a Wednesday night football type initiative at some point in time, right? And if you do that, then you're saying,
Well, why
okay,
play them all
well,
at the same time when you could spread them all out and
of
people will watch
course,
the Carolina Panthers
of
play the New York
course.
Jets? I mean, they
Well,
will.
oh, and we've said that Thursday night, we complain about how lousy Thursday night football is, yet everyone watches it still, right? I mean, I've said it over and over. People complain about Thursday night
Dude, I don't
football.
have a Netflix account. Am I
Well,
getting
but
the game
I
Wednesday?
understand, but
I mean,
well, it'll be on local TV. My
but the other game I won't be able to get, right?
Not if you don't have a Netflix account, correct?
These freaking creeps.
I
He
mean,
is Luke Jones. Let me take a break. I gotta go urinate, defecate,
you can
some
enjoy
vomit.
Christmas dinner, right?
I
I
gotta
mean, there you
relieve
go.
myself in some way of the fact that Netflix. I got your Peacock right here. Apple TV. I got all of that going on. He is Baltimore Luke. He's more calm than I am. It's a religious holiday. We'll all sit around, drink eggnog, and do what God wanted us to do, watch football on Christmas Day. There are two games. You can join our WNST sex service by texting, I don't say this enough, WNST to 410-821-9678. We have a short week around here, going to be doing a lot of music. We had just the greatest Crab Cake Tour guests, from Gina Shock to John Maroon to just down the list. Alan McCallum and Matt Campbell came by. Amici's last week. Calvin Statham came by with Jerry Piper. We did some old memories and some Christmas caroling over at Costas last week. All of it brought to you by the Maryland Lottery in conjunction with our friends at Jiffy Lube Multicare. Always appreciative of all of that. Make sure you set a spot on the dial. Make sure if you've ordered crab cakes from any of our sponsors, you eat them and get them fresh. And be safe. Be nice to your loved ones. And this is one thing that I have been writing this week, and I'm going to say a little bit on social media. Try to love your relatives as much as you love your football team on Christmas Day. He's Luke. I'm Nestor. We're back for more. We're WNST AM 1570. Taos in Baltimore. Baltimore positive. Stay with us.